Hey you, it's Thirsty Thursday. Welcome to an NBA mock draft edition of The Sweat presented by DraftKings. The voice you are listening to is my voice. I'm Emerson Lotzi. I'm sitting next to Jesse Cofield on a desk. At a desk in which you can also find Julian Edlow because today...
Smooth intro.
Very smooth, actually, if you go back and listen to it. Are you okay?
Smooth intro enhanced by Jesse Cofield.
Here we go.
Roller seltzer.
You are battling right now, and we are happy that you are here to battle because we have 4 analysts who will be battling through said NBA mock draft. So we have 14 picks that are going to be made today. You're on your cell phone right now. You are dialed in.
He's making his picks. He's texting GMs right now.
4 analysts picking for 3 franchises each. Here are the other 3 gentlemen with us right now. We have Nick Fryer, Nick Whalen, Chinmay Vaidya. Good to see all 3 of you. So no one is mocking pick number 1 because Jesse and I have decided
We already know
to take that one.
Yeah.
We are going to shock the world. We're going to select Wemby. That's right, losers. We are behind the wheel of the Victor Wembanyama hype train, and this is going to be an exciting evening or morning.
Yeah.
If you guys are so confident in it, you should bet on it. It's only minus 20,000.
Well, that's fine.
There's a lot of value there. Yes.
We'll put our cash together to win $100.
20K.
Yeah.
That's all you gotta
So
lay.
before we get to the picking, let's talk about Wemby here. Julian, why is this kid literally the most hyped prospect since LeBron James?
Well, he's literally the most hyped prospect since LeBron James because he is international. If he was not international, he would be the most hyped prospect ever.
Okay.
Like, from a pure, again, if you're going to tell me I can have LeBron's NBA career, what we know now, or draft Wembanyama, you're taking LeBron. But we got to take ourselves back to the time. If you grade these 2 guys as prospects, Wembanyama is the better prospect. He gives you something, LeBron James is one of the top 5 players of all time, but he's not necessarily a complete one-of-one prospect. Like, you can find his build and skill set to a degree in other guys. Wembanyama cannot be found. You cannot find a guy of his size that can move the way that he moves, shoot the way that he shoots, play both sides the way that he plays both sides. So it is a no-brainer. He needs to add some muscle. We'll see what he looks like coming over here.
Yeah.
Summer League in Vegas will be lit, but he's the best prospect that we've ever seen for the NBA.
Yeah. I mean, Whalen, after the Spurs won the draft lottery, his name was everywhere. And then we were seeing some comparisons to, like, Tim Duncan, David Robinson.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why. Obviously, the Spurs have had pretty great luck, kind of timing the lottery when they've chosen to not compete for titles throughout the years. But I want to go back quickly to what Julian said about Wembanyama being an international prospect. I think he's completely right about that. If Wembanyama had come up in America, had gone through college basketball or even gone to the G League, I think this would be on another level. I think the average fan probably hadn't heard a whole lot about Wembanyama until the last few months, maybe the showcase just before the start of this past regular season. But the fact that Wembanyama has gotten to this level as an international prospect is crazy. And I think Julian's right. If he was an American player, the hype would be completely ridiculous, and it would probably be even more than what we saw from LeBron back in the day, which feels like it's impossible to top. But yeah, when you talk about the Spurs, obviously it's a great fit. Not only a franchise that we trust, maybe above all else, when it comes to the last 20, 25 years of developing players, doing things the right way, being cautious, kind of developing players at their own pace. And I think that's going to be important with Wembanyama, but you also have the French connection, right? I mean, he's kind of grown up with Tony Parker as the steward of his development. Boris Diaw, of course, has ties to the Spurs as well. So, maybe there are some teams out there that felt like this was inevitable, but the Spurs really do seem like a great fit.
Chinmay, do you agree that if Wemby was a homegrown prospect, that the hype possibly could have eclipsed LeBron James?
I don't know if it necessarily would have eclipsed LeBron James. We had people streaming LeBron's games. ESPN was at LeBron's games, and they were, shutting down the power in gyms. So it's not like LeBron didn't get a ton of hype. I do agree that he would have had more hype or more of a general following across the fan base than he would have he would have had more of a following in the U.S. than he would have as an international prospect. But I still think that combination, the size, the skills that he possesses at that size, And the ability to move around the floor at that size is what makes him the most intriguing prospect since LeBron, as you said. Because if he can put it all together and stays healthy, this could be the best player ever. Maybe, we just haven't seen anything like this at his height. And San Antonio is obviously the perfect spot for him in terms of development. They're going to take the cautious approach with him and make sure he gets all the fundamentals down before really taking off with him.
All right, Fryer, give us your 2 cents on the Wemby hype.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair that if he was in the U.S., sure, that the hype would be a little bit different. But at the same time, like, we're in the midst of a heavy European invasion in NBA. I mean, you look at obviously what Jokic has done, with Giannis, and then Luka as well. I agree that, yes, it would be different if he was in the U.S., but there's never been a time where European basketball players have been, like, at such a height. To me, where we're bringing up, LeBron in some capacity, it's like, well, is he set up for disappointment in some capacity? Maybe at least in that first season. I mean, I don't expect him to be good, but anytime you're saying he's hyped up as much as LeBron, and then we're looking at the graphic with Tim Duncan and David Robinson, and now he's trying to reinvigorate a franchise that, obviously did well with those two aforementioned guys. I just can't help but think, yeah, he's going to be a little disappointing to start things off.
All right, dudes. In terms of betting, though, Jules mentioned it already. Minus 20,000 is where he is at on the DK Sportsbook to go.
Fairly confident.
Number one overall. But you can get him at minus 225 as Rookie of the Year right now. How much more do you like that play, Waylon?
Well, I definitely like it more than minus 20,000. I'll put that out there. Controversial take. And, going back to what Fryer just said, I think it's going to be interesting, how he's measured, because like Fryer kind of alluded to, I think a lot of people are going to consider, like, anything short of Wembanyama averaging 20, 10, and 3 blocks a game is going to feel like a disappointment. But I also feel like it could go the other way. And I'm actually a little bit surprised that he's not a heavier favorite for Rookie of the Year, because he's kind of the incumbent winner, right? Like, everybody expects him to win this award. And I think he's going to have to play his way out of Rookie of the Year. Everybody's going to want to give it to him. Like, any moment that he has where he has a highlight block, where he's covering a ton of ground, or a huge dunk, or a 30-point game, like, it's going to be a big, big deal. And I think it's going to be kind of inescapable throughout the season, all this Wembanyama coverage. So for someone like Scoot Henderson at plus 350, or people forget Chet Holmgren, he's kind of taken the Blake Griffin path here to potentially winning this award. He's at plus 450. Brandon Miller's closer to 10-1. Like, those guys are going to have to not only exceed Wembanyama in terms of their production during this rookie season, but they're going to have to blow it out of the water, because everybody's going to want to give this award to Wembanyama. So I think as long as he stays healthy, it's his award to lose. He'd have to be really, really disappointing, I think, to not win it. You could even go back to, like, LeBron's rookie year. Like, you could argue that Carmelo Anthony had a better rookie season than LeBron, but it didn't matter. LeBron, as long as he stayed healthy, was always winning that award.
All right, Chinmay, what's the move here on the DK Sportsbook with this guy?
Yeah, as Nick mentioned, obviously, minus 225 is way better than minus 20,000. My only concern with Wembanyama would be health, and we've seen it with big guys in general. When you move around, the more stress you put on your knees and ankles at that height, and the things that Wembanyama is doing, there's always a chance for an injury. Now, the only other player that I would consider taking ahead of Wembanyama would be Chet Holmgren, who has the exact same concerns. So at that point, I think I would go with Wembanyama just because he has that hype around him, and people have kind of forgotten about Chet Holmgren after the season off. So it would be between those two guys, and they both have the exact same concern for me, so I would go with Wembanyama.
Fryer, what concerns do you have that may have you proceeding with caution a little bit when it comes to betting Victor Wembanyama on the DK Sportsbook?
Well, I think Waylon made some good points with the LeBron-Carmelo comparison, and that is something to be factored in. But at the same time, when we talk about all this hype, I mean, look at what happened in the NBA with the MVP stuff this season. There was so obviously all this love around Nikola Jokic, but until he does what he needs to do, it's gonna be a little bit of a knock against him. He's only doing it in the regular season. And with Victor Wembanyama, all these expectations are there. I'm not saying I need him to go and be 25 and 10 a game necessarily for him to meet my expectations, but I would think with the voters, they're going to have them set pretty lofty too. And you have some other guys. I think Chet is a great example. I think Miller is another guy too who I'm really interested in at plus 950 on DraftKings Sportsbook, where I think he has a really good fit. So I think there are some guys here who come and steal this away from him. So at minus 125, it's not even value like we had with Paolo before the season last year. So I'm going to stay away on him for Rookie of the Year.
All right, Jules, how long do you think these minus 225 odds will last?
They should last right up until the season starts. I don't think you can get much steeper than this. The one thing that I'll disagree with the guys in is, they're saying the minus 225 intrigues them much more than 20,000. The minus 20,000 intrigues me more because we don't know who's going to win Rookie of the Year. We know who the number one pick is going to be. I know you're winning chump change, but there's a reason this got bet from minus 2,000 to minus 20,000. It's professionals that have the bankroll to lay that down and wait to get paid betting it because we know the outcome. So that said, the last couple number one overall picks, Cade Cunningham, Paolo Banchero, you split if you bet those guys. You're looking at the 2.5 to 3 to 1 range on those guys for their Rookie of the Year prices. It's a tough call. He should win the award, but you're paying a premium here. And the two red flags with San Antonio, number one, the Spurs invented load management. So we'll see how many games under his belt Wembanyama plays, even if he is fully healthy. And then number two, yes, you look at the body type and you say that looks sketchy. That could break.
Yeah.
So those are the two red flags. If I'm betting somebody else on the board, Chet Holmgren's actually the first guy I'm throwing out. I'm pretty low on Chet Holmgren.
He's a guy who could break too.
He probably will break, but even skill set wise, Chet Holmgren is nowhere near the type of player that Victor Wembanyama is. I'm pretty low on Holmgren. Scoot's priced well, but Brandon Miller being 9.5 to 1 is a little too steep. So I would go Brandon Miller if you're making me bet someone right now.
All right, well, Emerson and I just took the number one overall pick.
That's right.
Thank you to us.
Hey,
Thank you to
we
us.
are good.
Yeah, we are
good and great.
Now
and
it
grand.
is time for
Congrats.
you guys to do the rest. So we're going to
need
start
this.
with the number 2 pick from Charlotte, a.k.a. Julian.
Guy
And
you
this
just
is where
mentioned.
things get interesting, right? Because prior to the lottery, everyone, the consensus was really that Scoot Henderson was going to be the clear favorite to go number 2. But then the Hornets get that second overall pick. They already have LaMelo Ball as their point guard, which is why you as Charlotte are going with.
We're going to take Brandon Miller from Alabama, wing, 6'9", shooter with the number 2 overall pick. It's a debate, and Scoot Henderson was the guy slotted here all season long. The 3 things, I guess, that changed. Henderson didn't develop the jump shot that scouts hoped he would in the G League. He's still a fantastic prospect. I would compare him, and I'm not going to, we're going to get Scoot analysis on the next pick, but he's like a Derrick Rose, Russell Westbrook type of prospect. That's great. They won MVP awards. There are also guys that, people say you don't want Westbrook on your team now. Derrick Rose got dinged up. He's at the end of the bench. Brandon Miller, not only fit-wise next to Ball, is clearly the fit, but he, if you're comparing him to a ceiling, and I don't think he'll necessarily get it, but he's the ceiling of a Jason Tatum, Paul George type of player. 6'9", he can handle it, he can shoot. He had that cloud hanging over him, obviously, at Alabama with the gun situation. He apparently has cleaned that up, but with him, I think that you're getting a player and a person, according to the reports of these workouts, that is going to fit really well with Charlotte. They went Mark Williams, shot blocker, rebounder, center last year. They have LaMelo. They really need a wing, and this is a guy that can fit there and can shoot the ball really well. And we saw him play through adversity, those games at Alabama, when times were at their worst. He went on the road to South Carolina, scored 40-something points. He's a well-rounded wing that I think fits in Charlotte really well and has a very high ceiling. Relatively equal prospect to Scoot, so we're going to draft for position of need here.
Chinmay, do you agree with that pick? A lot of people saying Brandon Miller would really complement Ball's playing style here.
Yeah, and the need is there, the fit is there. If you're talking purely from a basketball sense, it makes perfect sense, and that's really the thing that Charlotte needs: a player on the outside, on the perimeter, outside of LaMelo Ball, who can get a bucket, and Brandon Miller can do that.
All right, well, let's scoot on down now to the
Oh,
third
sure.
overall selection in this year's fake NBA draft at DraftKings. Nick Whalen, you are choosing for Portland. Who are you choosing and why?
Well, Julian Wojnarowski already kind of tipped the pick here at
he
3.
cheated.
So we are, in fact, going with Scoot Henderson. Oftentimes, what the predictions are months before the draft tend to fall apart, but it really has felt like, for the last few months at least, it was going to be Wembanyama and then Miller or Henderson in some order in this top 3, and nothing's really changed there. So I still wouldn't be shocked if Scoot Henderson went to, there's been reports of some teams potentially looking to trade up to grab Scoot Henderson. The Pelicans specifically were named by Shams Charania earlier this week, so we'll see if it's ultimately Charlotte or Portland even making these picks at 2 and 3. But for our purposes, we'll go Scoot here. Best player available. Julian talked about, kind of maybe slightly drafting for need with Brandon Miller, already having LaMelo Ball in place. I get that. Obviously, Portland has Anthony Simons. They currently have Damian Lillard. They have Shaedon Sharpe, who looked really, really good at the end of last season. So the last thing they need is another, undersized offense-first guard. But I also think there's a decent chance that Damian Lillard might not be on this roster next season. And if he is, then there's a pretty good chance that either Anthony Simons and or Shaedon Sharpe aren't on this roster if they go in another direction. So to me, you just have to get the asset in the door. You have to get the guy that maybe even if you don't like him the most, there are other teams around the league that if you're talking about a trade, like him the most. So just in terms of drafting the best player available, we're going Scoot Henderson at 3.
All right, Fryer, after Wemby, after Miller, what makes Scoot Henderson the best player available?
Well, I mean, he does a good job on the defensive end, and obviously he can score. I mean, the biggest problem with him is his three-point shooting, which is something that he definitely needs to improve upon. But also, he's got a 6'9" wingspan, something like that, at 6'2". I mean, that makes him very appealing. The problem is that Portland's kind of just in a tough spot here, as Waylon talked about, like with having all the undersized guards. As much as he does have that wingspan, doesn't make him the best fit. But you got to take him here, see if you move him, and then if you decide to end up moving on from Damian Lillard and build around this guy in some capacity, it makes sense. So not the best fit for Portland, but definitely the pick that has to be made here.
All right. I'm seeing double for the 4th pick here. Ooh, Chinmay, you're liking one of the Thompson twins here.
Yeah, both Thompsons are similar players, but the Houston Rockets have to go with the upside on this one. And so we're going with Amen Thompson at number 4. And he just has more of a ceiling on the defensive end in terms of scoring. His shooting percentages are slightly better than his brothers. And he provides more of a fit with the Rockets in terms of what they're trying to do in terms of spatial versatility and defensive versatility. Now, Houston's going to have some things in free agency that they're working through. They have like $60 million in cap space. So that backcourt could be completely different. But Thompson is the player who has the most upside if they do decide to keep going forward with this rebuild, which is seemingly going nowhere. Houston was not really, fortunate in the lottery to get out of those top 3 picks. But this is where you just got to go with the player who has the most upside at this point. So we're going with Amen Thompson.
All right, Jules, I mean, Rockets could instantly plug him into a guard rotation. You got Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. there. Do you think he would be the best fit?
I don't, actually. We're
Oh,
just going personal.
a little drama.
Well, I mean, you asked me my personal opinion.
I do,
not
I
what
wanna
think
know
is
it.
gonna
I
happen in
do.
the draft. But yeah, I mean, from what I've been told, Udoka and his staff not all that interested in the Thompson twins, which would throw a little bit of a curveball in a lot of these mocks that I think personally are, despite where I might be going at number 6 in our mock draft, a little bit overrated, these kids in the draft. I think the thing that nobody's talking about, all these prospects are like 19. These kids are 21.
We're young, man.
They've been playing in the G League for a while, and now they're coming out, and they still haven't developed their shot. Personally, I think that hype is a little high on the Thompson twins, and that we might see that in the draft with them sliding a little bit. So fit-wise for Houston, they've taken so many bigs recently. They have Şengün, they have Jabari Smith, they have Tari Eason, so it's tough to say Walker or Hendricks or one of those kids, but they could go off the board and go with a bigger point guard to pair next to Jalen Green and an Anthony Black or something like that. So we'll see. Houston holds the key to how these cards fall, really.
And Detroit holds the 5th overall pick here. What's interesting, Nick Fryer, you will be selecting for the Pistons is Detroit entered the lottery with equal odds as San Antonio and Houston for the top overall selection. Here we are. They slide to 5, and that's a spot really yielding no clear answer for a team that lacks certainty across the roster. So what do you want to do?
Yeah, this is a tough spot, but at the same time, I know that I want to go with Cam Whitmore here out of Villanova, the 6'7" forward. He's athletic. He's got a good build. He runs the floor well. He's best when he's getting downhill. I like pairing him up with Cade Cunningham. Strong at the rim, too. And look, decent three-point shooter, too. He definitely needs to get better at improvising, which, hey, he's 19 years old, right? Julian's talking about with the Thompson twins with their age. He's got a little bit younger. He's just about to turn 19 years old after the draft, actually. And look, defensively too, he gives you versatility, should be able to play from 2 to 4, but he needs to improve a little bit when it comes to his awareness on the defensive end. But still, at number 5, where some of these other picks are a little bit clearer right now, really happy with Cam Whitmore and how he's going to help improve this young roster.
All right, Chinmay, does this fill a glaring roster hole in Detroit?
Not particularly, but I do think that, again, Whitmore possesses the most upside of all the players that are available at this point relative to the roster fit in Detroit, right? I mean, James Wiseman, Marvin Bagley are there, so you're probably not taking a big in Hendricks or Walker. And you have Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey, so you're probably not going with a guard, in which case you're left with a wing position. And Whitmore does have those flashes and that upside that you've seen. The Pistons have some time to kind of, get this thing in motion and see exactly how these pieces are going to fit. I also was remiss to mention Jalen Duren, who's probably going to be their starting center this season. So they have a lot of bigs. They have the guard positions locked down. I think it does make the most sense in terms of the upside and relative to the roster.
All right, pick 6. Let's move to Julian Edlow picking for Orlando, where you are taking the other half of the Thompson brothers.
Yeah, Orlando's tough to pick for, and they have 2 lottery picks, so they're going to get to fill needs. But, what are their needs? They kind of have addressed everything with lottery picks, but none of them have really stuck, with the exception of what likely looks like a star in Paolo Banchero, the number 1 overall pick from last year. But you look like bigs. They have Bol, they have Wendell Carter, they have the Wagner brothers. If Jonathan Isaac can ever turn into anything, they have him. So they have bigs at point guard. Cole Anthony, Markelle Fultz, Jalen Suggs. Is one of those guys finally going to stick? I don't know. So they could look at an Anthony Black here. If I was them, I probably would take Anthony Black here. But what they don't have from everything that I've said is that hyper-athletic wing, and that's what the Thompson twins are. Super athletic. They need shooting, but they have another lottery pick to address that we can use that on. So we'll go with, that athletic wing that can provide something that they don't necessarily have at the moment and hope to fill the shooting later in the lottery.
All right, yeah. Chinmay, what do you think, man? He's 6'7", so freakishly athletic here, and his jump shot does keep developing. And if it continues on that road, I mean, his upside is huge.
I think the Magic are about to have one of those lineups where everyone's 6'7" or taller in the starting 5. You got Banchero, you got both Wagners, Wendell Carter Jr., maybe Ausar Thompson 6 in the starting lineup. As Julian mentioned, none of the guards have really done anything. They've tried several options at point guard, and it just hasn't really worked out. Maybe Jalen Suggs breaks through. Maybe Markelle Fultz displays more consistency, but it just hasn't been good at the point guard spot. Maybe Banchero becomes their de facto point guard, primary ball handler. But they're in a good spot in terms of the talent that they've accumulated. And now it's just a question of whether it all comes together at the right time. And they do have another lottery pick, so they can address some of those other needs like shooting or perimeter defense, more specifically with that pick.
Lucky number 7, Nick Whalen, looking to the University of Central Florida, America's university, for his next selection.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that we'd have a UCF player going number 7 overall?
Not us.
But Taylor Hendricks is the guy.
No one.
Taylor Hendricks is the guy here. The more I watch of him, the more I like him. I know he's maybe just a tiny bit undersized compared to what you would like, but I get some Jaren Jackson vibes from him. I know there's been comparisons to guys like Jeremy Grant, energy players. He just kind of does everything at that size. And I think playing next to Miles Turner in Indiana gives you 2 really, really versatile two-way guys at the 4 and the 5. I think Miles Turner is kind of the type of player who protects Taylor Hendricks a little bit early on. And, I'm not a huge proponent of drafting for need, especially in the high to mid lottery, but that's probably the biggest hole right now on this Pacers roster. They definitely need another guard next to Tyrese Haliburton, depending on how they view Benedict Mathurin and Buddy Hield long term. I don't know if Hield's going to be in their plans, but the power forward spot was easily their weakest position. That's where we saw, in the DFS world, a lot of Jordan Nwora, a lot of Aaron Nesmith, some Jalen Smith, some O'Shea Brissett. Taylor Hendricks has significant.
Because as Waylon starts bringing up Miles Turner and bringing up a versatile big man, I'm thinking about, okay, well, what happened when it was him and Sabonis? And then obviously they ended up kind of having to part ways. I know there's a lot that goes into that, not just fit alone, but still, I like what he can do. He's a good shot blocker too. The biggest thing is, last I checked, he's like 6'9", but like 215 pounds. There are some slim reapers out there in the NBA, that's for sure. I mean, Nicholas Claxton is a guy I think of with that now as a guy who plays as a big versus someone like Kevin Durant, who's a little bit more of a scorer and can afford to be a little bit thinner. But that's just what my one concern with him. My one major concern with him going in is just, if he's going to play more of a big role, then he's probably got to pack on some pounds in some capacity.
All right, Chinmay, you now have the number 8 pick for Washington. Go ahead.
You know, this is a kind of a tough spot for the Wizards, and maybe one where they would hope that free agency would happen before the draft like it does in the NFL. Kristaps Porzingis has a player option. Kyle Kuzma has a player option. Bradley Beal trade rumors have started to kind of shoot off a little bit. So we don't really know what this Washington roster is going to look like. Maybe even on draft night, they make a move, maybe going up to number 3 with Portland in a Bradley Beal trade. Who knows? But I think at this point, Washington just needs a player who's going to get these other guys the ball, a guy who's going to set up the other players, Porzingis, Kuzma, and Beal, along with, Kispert as their lockdown three-point shooter. Avdi just starting to come into his own offensively. So we're going to take Anthony Black as that lead point guard out of Arkansas. His jump shot needs a lot of work. His overall offensive game in terms of scoring needs a lot of work, but he can drive to the basket well, and his pick and roll game is among the best in the draft. He can dish the ball to all the scorers at will, basically. And Washington does have enough floor spacing to where if Black starts to get into a rhythm, they can really take off offensively and really jump up into the lower level of that Eastern Conference playoff picture, assuming they keep all these guys together.
Julian, what do you think? Would that be who you would take for Washington at number 8?
Yeah, Chinmay laid it out. It's kind of a tough spot, like I feel, making the picks for the Magic. It's a tough spot for what you need, and you missed out on the elite talent in the draft. So what's the best of the rest? And, point guard is a position of need. They have a lot of wings like your Johnny Davises, your Corey Kisperts in recent drafts, but point guard hasn't been addressed there. I like Anthony Black's game as it, adapts to the current NBA. No, he doesn't have the shooting, but he has everything else plus the size. I was between Thompson and Black at number 6 for Orlando, and frankly, I think Black would be the better pick. I just think people are high on the Thompson twins, so that's where I went. But yeah, I think Black is a good pick at 8 and probably will go in the top 8, which is his draft position bet on DraftKings Sportsbook if you're looking for a bet and you don't mind laying minus 220.
Oh!
Which is pretty juicy, but top 8, minus 220.
Well,
Yes.
after 8 comes 9, and at 9 sits the Utah Jazz. I can count, yay. And one of my best friends, Nick Fryer, will be making the selection here. Sounds like you were all in on the other French player here.
Sounds like Taylor Hendricks wasn't the only guy at UCF who passed the math test. But at pick number 9, I'm going to go with, when we think of Metropolitans 92, we don't think of this guy first. Of course, we think of the guy who's going to go at number 1. But I'm going to go with this guy at number 9, Bilal Coulibaly. I'm probably not pronouncing his name, and I apologize. But 6'7", and look, he doesn't have the same shooting potential, but this guy is so explosive around the rim. And obviously, I've talked about a few different wingspans in here in this conversation so far. 7'3" wingspan at 6'7". That's going to make a huge difference both on the offensive end and the defensive end. And look, he plays the glass well too, and he's a good defender. I'm seeing that he might be able to guard point guards in some capacity at the next level once he kind of gets a feel for the NBA game. But he definitely can guard up to power forwards. Another guy who is a little bit too slim, probably coming into this league and needs to put on a little bit of weight. Doesn't have necessarily the best ball handling ability, but a guy who's a slasher, who's great in transition. I don't really care so much, especially when he knows what he's supposed to be doing out there and not necessarily trying to create for himself and everybody else. And also, looking at what he did overseas, a solid 3-point shooter. So it's, I'll take that. He's got the elite finishing ability, so a nice compliment. And then obviously the defense I'm very excited about.
Okay, Chinmay, one of the youngest players in this draft. He's freaking 18, so his stats don't really exactly jump off the page. Pro comparison here, Michael Kidd Gilchrist. Is that a good or a bad thing?
That's terrible.
I mean, that's not really all that great when you think about what Michael Kidd-Gilchrist's career ended up being. But I agree with the thought process behind the pick, especially where the Jazz are at, trying to get this rebuild underway, seeing what they have. You might as well take a guy who knew how to play with big men and knew how to set up big men. They have two out there in Utah who are looking like they could really be a dominant pairing in Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler. And you want a guy who knows how to play around those big guys. Bilal Coulibaly has done that with Wembanyama. So it's a different type of player. It's a different type of fit. But I think Utah is the right situation for him where he can really kind of develop under the radar, doesn't have high expectations immediately. They can kind of take their time with him.
All right, Julian, pick number 10 for Dallas
Ooh,
here.
wait, this is LeBron's future team.
Oh,
Right.
Oh,
So we gotta
Kyrie's
find a good
recruiting him
piece.
Dallas ranked at or near the bottom in both categories throughout the year. I'm talking rebounding and defense. So some needs to be filled with.
We absolutely need to fill rebounding, and we need some size to do it. This roster has Luka, Tim Hardaway Jr. They've used picks on Jaden Hardy. They've used picks on Josh Green, wings. So a player that probably was the best player on the board at 6, but is starting to slide here, and I do not think will be available in the actual draft, is Jarris Walker, freshman, big man from Houston. You know, he can rebound the ball. He plays defense. His shooting needs some work, but Dallas is the type of team, given their current roster, that can afford to pass on shooting for some much larger needs. And Jarris Walker fills that. He has an NBA-ready body. He's ready to go and eat up some of those minutes. You see the odds for him to go there, indicating that he will not be available. But, hey, I'm going to take the best player on the board, and he fills some massive needs for the Mavericks. They would be thrilled with this outcome.
There are a lot of trade rumors, too, swirling around the Mavs here.
Well, every rumor swirls when you have Kyrie because your direction is so unclear.
Good point.
You just traded for a all-star and tanked from 4th to 11th, so who knows what anybody could do with the Mavericks.
Waylon, if he's available here, I mean, he's got linebacker-like stature, this dude. So on defense, obviously an asset.
Yeah, he does. He does. I'm not the biggest Jarris Walker guy, but if you can get him at 10, I think that's incredible value. I know his kind of over-under prop at DK is like 6.5. So that's an indication that this is a good value, and he's only plus 275 to go in the top 5. So there's some belief that, you know, obviously he's sliding in our mock here, but that maybe won't be the case next Thursday. Incredible value for Dallas there. I mean, the one thing about Jarris Walker, he has like a 7'2", 7'3" wingspan, which is great, but he's only 6'7". He's kind of a little bit of a tweener, and that's not nearly as much of an issue in the current NBA as it was, 10 or 15 years ago. But I ultimately see him as a kind of higher end role player long term, which, look, if you're getting that at 10, that's totally fine. I think sometimes there's a belief that every pick has to turn into a star. But if you go back and just rank the top 10 players from each draft over the last 20 years, usually you only get 2, 3, maybe 4 all-star level players. So if you could get a very good role player at 10, I think that's exactly what Jarris Walker could be for the Mavs.
All right, well, this is your lucky day. You're going back to back.
Yeah, we are, baby.
At 11, it's Orlando. And you like a dude whose shooting touch is as pure as it gets for a 19-year-old.
Yes, I said that we need shooting, but we passed on it at 6, so we're going to take it at 11. That'll be Grady Dick from Kansas. Grady Dick or Jordan Hawkins. You can argue who's the better shooter in this draft. It's probably pretty close. Hawkins, obviously, maybe a little more well-known from the title run at UConn. Grady Dick, probably the more well-rounded player. You get good shooting, you get size, you get effort. He's a better defender than he gets credit for. So I think that, again, we're going on the wing here. We're getting size, but we're filling a massive need that was not filled at 6. So Grady Dick from Kansas, we're going to get some perimeter shooting in here on the Magic roster.
All right, Fryer, how safe of an asset, how safe of a selection is this for Orlando?
Yeah, it makes total sense here. I mean, he can spot up. He can come off a screen, too, when it comes to shooting. So, I mean, to have a guy like that where we're trying to go and, we have a ton of ball handlers already in Orlando, I think he's a really good addition. And as you mentioned, good size, solid defender. And also, too, one thing that I noticed is he, if teams are going to be going and trying to take away that three-point shot from him exclusively, which does make sense, he can kind of hurt them with backdoor cuts quite a bit, too. So the only concern with him is he's not an elite athlete, but that tends to happen with really, really good shooters. So, you got to sacrifice a little bit there.
All right, we're moving on to pick number 12. That is Oklahoma City. Nick Whalen, take it away.
We're going to go with Cason Wallace here. from Kentucky. We've seen plenty of Kentucky guards who kind of had up and down, questionable freshman seasons, get to the NBA and really hit their stride in the more open game. And I think Cason Wallace could kind of be the next in that line. And OKC at this point, they could kind of pick their path, I think, for next season. If they really want to, if they kind of play the free agency market, try to fill out this roster beyond the top 3, top 4, I think they could be as high as maybe the 4th or 5th best team in the Western Conference. But my guess is that they continue to push things along slowly. You're reintegrating Chet Holmgren, and I think Cason Wallace is the type of player who fits in just about any scenario. If you want to compete for a playoff spot this year, he's an NBA level defender right away. He's got good size. He can set players up. If you want to kind of use him as a developmental piece as you bring along the rest of this core, then that's fine as well. So you already have SGA in place. You have Josh Giddey. You have Lou Dort. You have Jalen Williams, who looks like a big hit from last year's draft. But I think Cason Wallace is the type of player that every team or every coach in the league wants on the roster. And maybe he operates as the first guard off the bench this season for OKC. I think that would be a great introduction to the NBA game for him.
Jules, is he the right piece for OKC?
Well, the fortunate part for OKC is they get so many hacks at finding the right pieces that they can take a lot of swings and swing for ceiling as well. Personally, I'm not a huge Wallace guy, but that's kind of what Nick said about my pick at number 10 with Walker. But it's a solid guy, and again, you're drafting for role players in this range. So I don't know how much better you can do is the problem. So I think that you're taking a high floor player here. So I like that, and OKC has a lot to build on, and they have a lot of other picks to draft for needs. So I don't mind it at all. I think there's probably some higher upside guys available at this point in the draft that maybe you could go with. But again, it depends what you want if you're OKC. Do you want to draft safe? Do you want to go for one of your home runs here? Because you have plenty of other chances to go for the home runs.
All right, pick number 13. Chinmay, you're up. You're selecting for Toronto here. Toronto needs some outside shooting. It needs playmaking, especially if Van Vliet is on the move.
Probably another team that would hope that free agency comes before the NBA draft. Van Vliet opting out of his player option. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent. Gary Trent Jr. also on the market. So that backcourt very much in flux. I think Toronto would have taken a guard anyway and is going to take a guard anyway, regardless of how these decisions play out. And I do think that Van Vliet, if he does come back to Toronto, is going to move into more of an off-the-ball role. So with a 13th pick, the Toronto Raptors select Jalen Hood-Schifino, the guard out of Indiana. Hood-Schifino has good size, good measurables. The three-point shot needs to come around. It's getting there. He's been inconsistent with it. He has some nights where he's hitting everything and some nights where, he can't hit an ocean. So the three-point shot needs to be more consistent, but he's an excellent mid-range shooter. And the pick-and-roll game is great when you have guys like Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam in there who are going to get most of the shots in Toronto, most of the usage. It's good to have a guy like Hood-Schifino who can pass the ball around. And I think if Van Vliet does come back, he'll be more off the ball. So Toronto's taking a guard, and it'll just be whoever their preference is at this point with the players available.
And Waylon, if you read about this dude's workouts here in the pre-draft process, he's absolutely dazzling. But as Chinmay has pointed out, how concerned would you be with his inconsistency during his freshman season shooting the ball? The highs were high, but the lows were low.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what you have to live with at this range in the draft, right? I mean, you're not going to have these, kind of bulletproof prospects when you're talking 12th, 13th overall pick. But overall, I do like this as a potential landing spot for Hood-Schifino. I think Toronto, this just seems like a Toronto pick. These are the type of players, physically that they tend to target, especially if they part ways with Fred VanVleet, who didn't really fit the Toronto mold, right? Like everybody else on that roster, is 6'8", 6'9", with 7'3" wingspans, and he's like, 6'1" on a good day. So I think this makes sense for the direction that they've been wanting to go as far as building their team. And the shooting inconsistency, it's a problem for sure. It sounds like he's at least impressed teams with the progress that he's made in these workouts, but ultimately you never know. There's a lot of players who can shoot the ball really well in practice, shoot the ball well in workouts, and sometimes it doesn't transfer. But when you have a guy who's 6'4", 6'5", 6'10" wingspan, like even if the shooting takes some time to come around, he's going to be able to contribute in other ways.
All right, let's move to our final pick of the NBA mock draft. That is going to be pick number 14. Nick Fryer picking for New Orleans. Now, Nick, Pelicans had a pretty disappointing season. So where are we going from here? Hopefully we have a healthy Zion.
Oh, dude, he's bound for Carolina.
Yeah,
Yep.
Oh.
He will be joining MJ.
Oh, please.
MJ's bringing him back to the
Don't
Carolinas.
listen to Emerson. Please go ahead,
Okay.
Nick
I
Fryer.
generally find that's a good practice. Thank you, Jesse. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there are definitely still concerns with Zion Williamson. There's a lot going on there. But yeah, look, as much as it was a disappointing season, you still were able to battle a little bit and not have your best guy throughout most of the year, and that's adversity that you weren't necessarily expecting to handle. That said, I'm gonna go with the 6'4" guard out of Baylor, KEYONTE George. Look, the biggest thing, one of the reasons I like him most is that he's a good finisher. He attacks downhill. I know his long-range shooting needs to improve at his size, but his decision-making does a little bit too. But he knows how to create, knows how to finish with both hands, and I like pairing him with a mature guard like CJ McCollum, who a guy who may end up handling the ball more than George does. But George is used to playing off the ball. He did it in college as well, so they can kind of mix and match. And I just think partnering him up with a mature guard is going to be good for this guy's career.
Chinmay, do you like that pick, adding like a high-quality backup point guard here?
I think George is the best player in this spot relative to the fit on the roster. And I do think ultimately New Orleans does move out of this spot. There's just too much noise around them going after Scoot Henderson. And maybe they don't have the juice to go all the way up to 2 or 3 with giving one of those, big name players away. They're not trading McCollum. I don't think they're trading Ingram. And even though there's a lot of noise around Zion Williamson, I just don't see how the Pelicans can move him. But as the guys and I have gone through this draft and we've taken these guards like Anthony Black, Cason Wallace, Jalen Hood-Schifino, point guard is a need for New Orleans. They don't have that true point guard. So maybe they can't get all the way up to 2 or 3, but maybe they jump up to that 7, 8 range and snag one of these other guards. So I think at this spot, George is the best pick for New Orleans relative to the roster, but I'm very confident that New Orleans ultimately doesn't end up selecting at 14.
Gentlemen, that is how you do what you just did. So let's get some reaction now. Let's get some big fat takeaways from the 14 picks. Well, 13 picks that you 4 just made, because Jesse and I again took Wemby number 1 overall. There are the results on your screen. Jules, you see this list. Which one of our guys reached for their pick? Who is just absolutely lost and should never draft for a team ever again?
I don't think any of it's that
Okay.
bad. I think that Jarris Walker shouldn't be there at 10, but I don't put that on any one guy. Like, everybody passed up on him in a spot that he could have gone. Personally, I like to hate on myself. I think the Thompson pick at 6. I think the Thompson twins are just going too high in this draft. I'm trying to mock draft it, so I'm trying to play along. I think neither of them go in the top 5, and I think maybe Amon could be the first one gone at 6 or 8, and I think these kids start to slide. I think Jarris Walker is still plus 150 to go before Ausar, who is considered to be the second twin to go. So I think there's still some good ways to fade them. So I'll just fade myself here.
Nice, dude.
Nice.
Great.
Yeah.
Now we know to never
Good
trust
choice.
anything you ever do.
You should never trust me.
Fryer, which pick surprised you the most?
I think Julian put it pretty well by and large. I wasn't overly surprised by both these,
Okay.
but I'm with him that the Thompson brothers is kind of where I land. Specifically, was going to talk about him, so he's kind of make it hard for me to follow up. I can't go and trash him too much.
See, I hate
But,
on myself before you can.
Exactly, I respect that. It's the way to go. But look, the long range, lack of long range shooting is something that stands out. And you said it earlier when you made the picks too. These guys are older, and it's taken them a little bit of time to get here necessarily. I respect the patience and everything, but for them to be a little bit older than most of these other people, where hey, I may have done a little bit of a reach at the number 9 pick, but I'm getting a younger guy, a guy who's overseas. Whereas with the Thompsons, they've been kind of in the NBA system for a while. So I don't think that they're the wrong picks. I wouldn't be surprised if the Thompsons go this high, but they're still going to be reaches nonetheless.
All right, Waylon, what do you think?
I'm unfortunately gonna have to echo what Nick and Julian said. I don't think there's any crazy controversial picks here. Walker probably doesn't go 10. I agree with that, but it's hard to argue with the 3 or 4 guys that went ahead of him. But just to kind of continue piling on the Thompson twins, if one of those guys goes to Houston, man, I just don't know that that's a great landing spot. I know the Rockets roster might look a lot different come September, October than it does right now, but that would be a spot that would really concern me, especially with the stagnation of a guy like Jalen Green in year two. I think, Amen Thompson, for example, is probably even, significantly more raw than Jalen Green was coming into the league. So, I don't mind if one of them were to land in Orlando. You got 2 shots at it in the lottery. Maybe you play it relatively safe with a pick like Grady Dick at 11, and you shoot for the stars with one of the Thompsons at 6. I understand that, but it's just hard to really get a gauge on these guys. Like Julian said, I think the belief is that, they reclassified. They're like 17. Like, no, they're not. They're older than most of the players in the lottery. We have no idea how to gauge them against the level of competition they've been playing in this overtime league, which is like half basketball, half like Panama City Beach club during these games. So it's just really high risk, high reward. And, if I'm a team like Orlando and I have bullets that I can fire here and it's okay if I miss, that's all well and good. But if you're one of these teams that feels like, man, we need to hit this pick in the top 5, I'd be terrified to take one of those guys.
All right, Chime, which selection today is most concerning to you or doesn't seem like a great fit?
Well, these guys mentioned that none of these picks are really too out there. Outside of Jarris Walker falling all the way to 10, I don't think that's really going to happen. But you know what that means? That means that there's going to be a lot of movement, a lot of trade potential, a lot of noise happening during this draft because teams just don't know, outside of the top 3, who's really any good, who's going to pan out. And the lack of long-range shooting outside of Grady Dick and to a certain extent Cam Whitmore, there's not really that many great knockdown shooters where a team can say, all right, well, at least we know that this guy's going to hit the 3-ball well, and we can work around that for his overall game. So I think, even Charlotte at 2, what's the long-term fit there for LaMelo Ball? Are they going to pay him that big contract? Or do they go with Scoot Henderson at number 2? The Blazers at number 3, I mean, they don't really want a 4th point guard, and they're trying to move pieces around to, make a run at this with Damian Lillard. And the Pelicans probably aren't going to get there with 14. I've already mentioned that. But I think Orlando, with 2 lottery picks and a lot of young players who fit on the wing with Portland, that could be a spot where Orlando jumps all the way up to 3, grabs Scoot Henderson as the point guard that they've tried to plug and play for so long, and run with Banchero, Scoot, and Wagner, and the rest of the guys who are there after any trade. So I think there's going to be a lot of movement, or a lot of at least rumors of movement in this draft outside of the top 3. As we mentioned, none of these picks are really crazy out there because a lot of these guys we just don't know. We haven't seen them play against high-level competition enough. And at best, they're inconsistent in some of the key metrics that teams look at. So I expect there to be a lot of noise in the coming days about trades and potentially moving up. And I think the Blazers at number 3 are definitely the team to watch because you have Orlando with 2 lottery picks, the Wizards with Bradley Beal, and then the Pelicans who have already tried to jump up and have made it known that they're trying to jump up. So that's a team to watch in the draft. And the draft really starts at 2 and then at 3 after Wembanyama.
I'm just going to add one more guy for surprises because we're talking about the guys that were drafted. I'm going to talk about a guy that we didn't have in the lottery, who I would have taken at 10 with Dallas, but Jarris Walker fell to me, is Derek Lively from Duke. This is a guy that was the number 1 overall prospect in high school entering the year and didn't quite pan out, but, it can be hard for these big guys in college basketball. So he's a guy, I think, 10 at Dallas, and I think even 12 at OKC, where Nick picked. OKC, again, can swing for the home runs, can go for those number 1 overall type of talents. Even with Chet Holmgren, they can still use size. So Lively is a guy that we didn't select that I would be surprised if he doesn't wind up in the lottery next week.
All right, guys, like Wemby is the obvious number 1. We've already talked about that. But we have a good Scoot Henderson / Brandon Miller debate at number 2. So the favorite right now for top 3 exact order is Wembanyama, Miller, Henderson, and that's at minus 230. And that's how our mock draft did shape up. So do you think that we're locked into that, Waylon, or could we see something crazy happen here?
I don't think we're locked into it by any means. I think it's most likely, as the odds would imply. But, as we mentioned earlier, I think there's a chance that, either the 2 or the number 3 pick could be on the market, right? And, I think Portland seems to be dragging its feet a little bit as far as how the Damian Lillard situation is going to play out. I'd be surprised if there's any major movement there before the draft, but I think Charlotte is open to pretty much any option, and we've discussed most of those already on this show. So yeah, most likely right now, if everything stays San Antonio, Charlotte, Portland in that order, yeah, I think we get Wembanyama, Miller, and Henderson. But I'm not convinced that Charlotte will be picking at 2, and I'm not 100% sure that Portland will be picking at 3. So if a team trades up, my guess is that Henderson would be the pick. And that would likely require you to get to number 2.
Yeah, Chinmay, you said you could see some changes here at 2/3.
The one sneaky thing that kind of hasn't materialized and probably will not materialize in the next week is Charlotte's ownership situation is a bit in limbo. We've heard rumors of Michael Jordan parting ways with the team and a new ownership group taking over. And anytime there's a new ownership group, we saw it in Phoenix with Matt Ishbia, they want to make a mark immediately. And that's the kind of way to move on from LaMelo Ball and blow this thing up completely and refresh. So we're probably not going to see that in a week. It takes more than a week for these things to kind of materialize. But that would be a team that, even Charlotte is definitely not a sure thing to take Brandon Miller. I think Wembanyama is the only guy who we can really pencil in for sure at number 1. And I do think Miller and Henderson ultimately do go 2 and 3 in some fashion. So if you're looking for bets on the DK Sportsbook, it has to be either Wembanyama, Miller, Henderson, or Wembanyama, Henderson, Miller. I don't think there are any other options in terms of who teams are going to pick. Now, where those guys actually end up in terms of Miller and Henderson is a completely different story, because Charlotte might take Brandon Miller and then trade Brandon Miller to some other team, or the Blazers might take Scoot Henderson and then trade Scoot Henderson to some team. So I guess this market is really, who will the first 3 picks be? I think it'll be those 3 guys, and you're only looking at 2 particular bets in that situation. So I think that's the case for the top 3. But like these guys have mentioned, anything can really happen at 2. And I think really 3 is I think the Trailblazers are going to have to make some major decisions here in the coming days. And I would be shocked if they're the ones who actually end up with the guy that is taken at number 3.
Hey, Fryer, we eliminated trade from our mock draft, obviously, but which team is poised to make a move come next week?
I'll tell you what, you say that, but I was texting our number 2 pick, Julian, to try and move up from the Pelicans pick because rules were made to be broken, but he just decided not to answer his phone at all. So yeah,
That's
I would have
weird. He's
taken
always
Scoot
on
there,
it.
and I think, and obviously, and Chinmay's been talking about a ton. It makes perfect sense. I do think that this play that we're talking about right now on DraftKings Sportsbook is a tough one to gauge, just because, yeah, the Blazers are in a weird spot, and then you look at Charlotte too. Like, I love the fit for Miller. I think he'd be a great addition to that team, especially if LaMelo is good to go this season. This is a team that should improve a lot with that addition. That said, there's a lot of uncertainty there. The Pelicans have incentive to move up, and obviously there's a whole lot going on with Portland too. So it just seems like a lot could happen where at minus 230, I don't love this play.
All right, Jules, is there a team you're feeling could make a move in or out of the lottery?
Yeah, it's hard for me to necessarily find a team, but I'll say this. I think Portland is the most likely to make a move, and that doesn't even mean they trade 3. It's just you probably can't have this roster move forward very long with Lillard and whoever the number 3 pick is. You're either going young or you're using some of these young pieces to build around Lillard. So Portland, one way or another, whether it's trading the pick, trading Lillard, or moving some combination of picks and players at some point between now and the start of the season, I think would make the most sense to me.
All right, Chinmay, really quick, which team in the lottery, like aside from San Antonio, obviously, do you think could make the biggest leap next season given who they could snag?
Yeah, I actually don't even know that the Spurs are going to be that good next year. We don't know how Wembanyama is going to operate with these perimeter players that San Antonio has. So I actually really like Orlando with 2 lottery picks potentially if they move up to get a more high-profile guy. They already have Banchero. They already have Wagner. The bottom of the Eastern Conference, as we just saw this season, is not all that great. So there's a chance that Orlando could really take the quantum leap, especially if Banchero keeps going on this upward trend. Wendell Carter Jr. has improved every single season that he's been in the league. Really, for the Magic, it's just the point guard spot. If one of those 4 point guards can find a way to display some level of consistency, some level of delivering heavy minutes, then I think Orlando is best poised to make that jump because they already have those 2-star guys potentially in Banchero and Wagner who can take over games. So I would like Orlando as the team to really make a move out of the long-time lottery team that they've been to be competing for a playoff spot.
Fry, really quick, are you in agreement on that one, or you think it could be a different team?
I tend to agree, but another team that I think could make a significant jump too is Charlotte. I mean, this was a team that was a play-in team 2 seasons ago and obviously riddled with injuries throughout the course of this year. You add a guy like Miller to the mix, and I think you can at least be back in the play-in tournament, if not better, because again, the bottom of the Eastern Conference is wide open.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. That is all the time we have for today. The real draft arrives 1 week from today. Enjoy that. Enjoy the show tomorrow morning, 11 o'clock Eastern Time.